Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the QT2 Systems podcast series 10 Tips to Crush Your Next Triathlon. In this series, we're bringing our coaches to talk about their areas of expertise and all the ways that you can have a successful race day, both before the race and actually on race day, things you can do. So today's topic, I think, is one that's really of interest to every triathlete out there, which is the swim and what you need to do to master the swim. And I'm really excited to have our resident swim expert with us today, Coach Vinny Johnson. Welcome, Vinny.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's always great. You give such good advice on the swim, and I think that this one is going to be like piecing it together, right from the beginning. So episode 1, we had Coach Jackie Miller on, and she talked about how you pick the right race. And one of those factors was the type of swim, whether it's an ocean swim, a downriver swim, lake swim. And so now I'm assuming you've already picked your race, you're ready to go, and we know. Let's just start out. Vinny will just say someone's training for an Ironman distance race, so 2.4 mile swim. So how do they approach their training? Where do they start?
Yeah, I would approach the training based off of pretty much what their background is. I would find that runners need to really focus in on upper body strength. Cyclists tend to be a little tighter in the upper body, so they need to really kind of focus in on kind of flexibility. We also see some athletes that come from like hockey or skiing and cycling that have really stiff ankles. And so it's important to kind of think about where you're coming from and what your weaknesses is going to be in the water. Um, because it's a very weird kind of concept of swimming because we have to pay attention to so many access points with the environment. So when we run, all we have to worry about is really 2 feet hitting the ground. When we ride a bike, there's 5 pieces of us that interact with the bike. But in the water, there's just a lot more kind of moving parts. So the first thing is just to really think about your background and what your body weakness will be. And that kind of sets up the type of training that you'd want to do. You want to shoot for getting in the water 3 times a week. I know where I'm from, we're seeing a lot more issues with getting pool time and getting lap time in. So it is one of these things where you do need to pay attention to sometimes doing dry land training, and we'll kind of come back around to that because it becomes a logistical stress to try to get to a pool. There's always a set schedule, and it becomes more stressful than it really should. But I like to get people. It's not the most stimulating thing in the world to kind of go back and forth in a pool. So starting off by doing like 1,500 or 2,000, and then really building up to trying to get to 3,000 yard sessions is really a good kind of starting point. We like to see 12,000 over the course of a week is kind of what we want to peak at. But if you're getting in the water at the very minimum 3 times, that's kind of perfect.
Okay. So let's say, I mean, although it sounds crazy to think about it, there's many people who sign up for an Ironman that don't know how to swim.
Yep.
Okay. So they'll get into the water, they'll maybe be able to swim a lap or two and be like, oh,
Yeah.
what did I do? So how do you get from that, not feeling very comfortable swimming even like a 500 to being able to slowly build up over time to get the distance in?
Yeah, it's really working with somebody in the pool. Even at the very least, um, and it doesn't even have to be somebody that necessarily is a triathlon coach or a swim coach, but most pools have people that give swim lessons. And one of some of the basic things that we can really work on is breathing in the water. A lot of people don't necessarily really know that you want to concentrate on breathing out. And so sometimes that's a thing that really helps people. They try to breathe in too much, which can lead to some stresses in the open water. But just getting the really basics of going back to being 7 years old and going through the motions of a swim lesson is super important. It seems a little kind of hard for us to necessarily deal with ego wise. But it's just a great kind of step. Because what you think you look like in the water and what you think you're doing in the water does not line up with reality. So it's just super important as you transition to kind of like the basic lessons to really get some eyes on you. Um, and sometimes that is just asking a lifeguard to take some photos or some video with your phone and sending it, if you're with QT2, sending it to me or sending it to a coach. There's just tons of ways that you can even you look at what you look like, and critique yourself. Because we kind of know what swimming should look like, but all of a sudden when we actually see us, it is shocking. And I swam all my life, and I was still doing videos to the, 30, 35 years into swimming. Like you just constantly have to look at what you're doing to make sure that you're wiring the technique in. So that's just super important before you even start to kind of swim to really understand what you look like and what you should be focusing on.
Okay. So, I mean, that sort of pulls in then doing drill work as part of a workout as well.
Yeah, you're gonna have, I would say a majority of the issues, especially when you first start swimming, is having balance and really just understanding that um, you hold your balance with your body and not your arms and your legs. And so when we lose our balance on land, we push out our arms and our legs to kind of catch us. And we do the same thing in the water when we feel unbalanced. We tend to push in different directions, and that just defeats the whole purpose of swimming. Because we need to be kind of pulling water as opposed to kind of pushing it out of the way.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, drills are super, super. Swimming is a technique-driven sport. It doesn't matter what your fitness is. It doesn't matter what your strengths are. If you don't have the right technique, it doesn't matter how hard you work. And so it is essential to any workout is you have a drill portion to it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some videos where one I saw the other day, which was about, they showed two swimmers in the water and one of them looked like they were barely taking a stroke. And
Yeah,
then one that was like working like crazy. And the one that looks like they were barely working was going faster because their position in the water was
yeah,
really important. Like if you can't balance in the water, it doesn't matter how hard
no.
you're working. You're just wasting energy at that point.
Yeah, because conceptually, we don't move the water. We grab water and then we move past it. So it's
Mhm.
like a cross-country skier when they put their pole in the snow. That once the pole is in the snow, that doesn't move. Your body's moving past the pole. It's the same thing with swimming, but people think they need to work the water harder and they're
Yeah.
going to go faster, almost like a propeller or something like that, as opposed to no, you got to get your arm in, grab that water, and once you have it grabbed, now you got to get your body past that point because that actually doesn't move in reality. So and again, goes against sometimes like when we were running, just push harder and force more exertion on the environment. And it's the complete opposite with swimming. When like you want to go faster, you need to kind of be calmer and more streamlined and kind of pierce through the environment as opposed to kind of really just grab the environment and make it move for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, I think conceptually it's kind of hard to pull all that together, but that's where watching videos, I
Yeah,
think both of yourself and of people who are really strong swimmers. I love watching videos of swimmers because you just like, wow. I mean, it's so smooth and then you can kind of like it makes sense. Some of what you're saying, I think makes sense
right,
when you can see other people do it. So,
right, exactly.
yeah. And then, all right, so drills, one other thing, like a lot of time when people swim, I feel like they get into the pool and they just swim 1,500 straight.
Yep.
Is that something that you recommend, or do you recommend breaking the workout up in a different way?
Sometimes it's based on um, if you're very efficient at being inefficient, swimming straight is not good because you're just doing the same inefficient thing over and over and over and over again. Um, And so it really just depends on where you're at. If you're just starting, you should really just be, again, kind of just breaking it down into drills, balance drills, kicking drills. Thinking about what you have in your bag to kind of really help you move through the water and get more of a feel for the water. Fins are great because it kind of takes that stress of feeling like you can't catch your breath or you're just kind of sinking. So using fins is a great way to just kind of feel more confident in the water. Pull buoys can, do the same thing where it kind of eliminates some of the variables of stress. You can kind of focus in on things. Paddles as well, just having paddles and being able to kind of work the paddles is good for building the strength up in your upper body. Um, so no, I don't like straight swimming for kind of a beginner. Um, I like to kind of descend short segments of workouts where, if you do it like doing 75s, where you kind of go 25 easy, 25 medium, 25 fast, where you kind of just get a sense of kind of building that effort. So like 75s and 100s and 150s, just kind of breaking it up, giving yourself time to stop and recalibrate and think about what you're doing as opposed to just you're not going to have the fitness to kind of hold technique together. And once your technique starts to fail, you should just stop and just change up what you're doing because it really just leads to injury. It leads to, just becoming efficient at inefficiencies in your stroke. So, and again, it's very hard for us to sometimes do that, but just change it up. Get a kickboard and kick when you just feel like you're just not feeling it in the water. There's other, things to do that can kind of help you.
Yeah, and I think even like breaking it up in the water just makes the session go by
Oh,
quicker
yeah.
too. It's more interesting, right? Like if you give me a workout that says go in and swim 3 by 1,000, okay. I mean, there's arguments to do that. There's no question. But I'd rather do like, okay, let's do some 200, some 150, some hundreds, some 50s, just like I feel like mixing in both the different distances and speeds and then the pool toys keep
Yep.
things like, you know, just more interesting so you can
Yeah,
get
because a
to do
lot
the
of times
workouts.
we're doing this by ourselves. We're showing up with a piece of paper by ourselves at a pool. We have to share a lane. Somebody else is doing something completely different, and there might be 3 or 4 people that are, sharing the lane. It's not like real swimmers. Real swimmers show up with 20 to 40 people that are gonna suffer with them, and there's competition. You're next to somebody, you're kind of all doing the same thing. It's a completely different stimulation. Um, and it's more competitive. So you're just kind of in that heat of battle sometimes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, like 2 hours went by.
Mhm.
But swimming triathlon is it's not it takes a lot,
Yeah.
it really does. So the more you can kind of spice it up, mix it up, the better.
So what do you think of triathletes doing masters swim?
I think it's great as long as it doesn't negatively impact kind of your other workouts. I mean, at the end of the day, the swim is the swim. It's a pretty insignificant variable if you kind of think of what the day encapsulates and takes into account, especially at the Ironman distance. So I think it's important to always just the bike is king. And so paying attention to masters, it's just important to make sure that it's not the long run day. You're not going to go to masters and do your long run on a Sunday. So it's the Monday night masters, but you have your bike session in the morning. So that's the only thing I tend to pay attention to when people want to do it. I don't want to stop them from doing it. I think it's fantastic. It just can't negatively impact biking or running.
And it's sort of at the outset, you talked about like for Ironman distance that you want to get up to about 12,000 yards. So roughly 3 times the race distance is what you're looking for.
Yep. Yep.
And then how about like like the longest workout? Do you have people go up to race distance, past race distance? What are your generally the targets?
Yeah, I find that I'm limited by pool time for the most part. I very rarely are able to find big chunks of time. I'd probably push more of a time based as opposed to a yardage base. So if we think about some people it takes some, hour and 15, hour and 30 in the water. I would try to get a workout, one or two of those that are like that. Most people will transition to open water, and that's when I'll cover kind of more of the distance, getting closer to kind of a race simulation in terms of distance. But yeah, I tend to go more time based, just because there's too many moving pieces usually with swimming. Um, Pool time, people in the lanes, and those kind of things. So it's hard to kind of nail it down. But I usually try to get them to get in the amount of time I expect them to be in the water, a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, and that does sort of put us to the next point is that the pools are, I really, gosh, around here, I'm in upstate New York, and it's really difficult to get into the pool. And a lot of them, I mean, they do 30-minute reservations. Like, what's 30 minutes going to do? If you get lucky, you can get two 30-minute blocks, together. But sometimes it's, you need to work in other things. And last year for training for an Ironman, I actually spent like this time of year, I did a lot of my training on the Vasa trainer. I had years and years and years of pool experience, but I found that that was at least a good supplemental training. Worked okay for me. I don't think it was as fast as when I spent all my time in the water, but at
Right,
least it
right.
it was an
Yeah.
efficient way to get in some extra sessions. So
Yeah, yeah, I've seen just a huge drop off in pool availability. It's just I think it started to kind of get a little weak around COVID, and then once COVID hit, it really seemed like it shut down. So um, I've been using a cross-country ski machine, ski concept, and so it's a fan, and you basically like pull down on it. That's been really actually enjoyable, and really does swimming technique very very nicely. You can kind of get your elbows bent, push down on it. So really any kind of motion that you can get where you're pulling down on some sort of resistance, just is huge, to kind of just fill in those gaps of pull time. But yeah, Vasa trainers, ski concepts, or just bands. Um, it's not exciting, but swimming is all about your flexibility and your scapula. So it's really just focusing in on um, those type of stretches that you can kind of really kind of open up your scapula, because we talk about all these things in the water and being able to do certain techniques, but if your body can't actually move in that direction, then um,
mhm.
kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, I mean, when I work with runners, I tell them that there's one of three things that are limiting your technique. Either it's strength, flexibility, or you don't know you're supposed to do it.
Right.
It's one of those
Right.
three things. And it's probably similar in the pool, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yep. 100%. So, I mean, that's when we get back to, talking about balance is, you always want to be on your side and you want to try to get to the other side as quick as possible. But, and that's the only way to really grab water is to be on your side. So you can actually allow the biomechanics of your body to do what it's supposed to do, because you can't grab water when you're kind of square to it. And so once you're on your side, you can kind of start to do that. But your body has to be flexible enough to do it. So
Right, right. So, okay, so let's let's say we're hitting, it's May, it's starting to warm up. How important is it, do you think, that people get into the open water before the races?
yeah, it's super important because of the fact that most of the time we're in a pool, it's really bright and safe. You can see 360 degrees around you in all directions, and it's very safe. What we don't realize is we're going to be up extremely early in the morning. We are going to be stressed. We're going to put on a suit that's going to constrict us from kind of head to toe. And then we're probably not going to be quite warmed up, and we're going to go really, really hard and be around a very stressful amount of thrashing in no time. And one of the bigger things is you're going to be looking at an abyss that's black. And if you think about what the body is going to go through in terms of like a fight and flight response, we're going to get all kind of those negative feedback loops of please stop doing what you're doing right now. Um, so you have to kind of get used to that. Get used to, if you're in a if you're going to do an open water in the ocean, like get used to the fact that the sand looks a certain way and there's certain organisms there. I remember doing Ironman Florida, and you can see rays, at the bottom, and they're trying to get away from you, but it's just one of those things where you just need to kind of also understand what's going on. If you swim in a pond or a lake, you know, you're gonna go from sand to all of a sudden everything's gonna look like grass. And so it's getting used to those visuals of what you're possibly gonna see. And also just paying attention to how you react to it. Um, Again, I kind of alluded to breathing. When we get really stressed and we try to work really hard, we tend to really focus in on breathing in a lot. And so what ends up happening is I find people will, I call it spin their wheels, where they get into the start of the swim and they try to speed up the front end of their stroke.
Mhm.
And it's a very, very fast cadence of motion, and they start to breathe in very, very quickly, as opposed to really trying to, and I kind of write this in a lot of my pre-race notes, is to really, really try to make the back end of your stroke as quick as possible. Just don't focus in on the front. If you want to go fast, just make the back end of your stroke. So when your hand kind of gets to your armpit area, just make that faster. That also will extend out your push and your stroke, and it will give you more time to breathe. I find
Mhm.
when people are kind of spinning their wheels, they're not allowing themselves to get to the side to really get a good breath. And you really need to focus in on breathing out. A breath moves because of pressure changes with the atmosphere in your lungs. So before you breathe, if you breathe out a lot, when you go to take a breath, you're going to breathe in a lot. If you're holding your breath and not blowing bubbles and you go to breathe, there's not enough pressure change to really get a lot of oxygen in. And so that's just super important to realize, like when you want to breathe, just breathe out a lot. Getting both eyeballs to brightness is super important to calm you down. So if you're stressed, when both those eyeballs are looking down and it sees black, it's not a good feedback to the brain. And so if you're feeling like you're getting stressed, try to, we don't want this to be proper technique, but you need to kind of chill out. And so when you go take a breath, try to get both eyes out of the water into the kind of brightest aspect of the sky. And that will kind of offset some of that darkness too. Um, I think those are the big ones in terms of, really understanding that things are really stressful kind of between the start and that first kind of turn buoy, and that it's completely okay to really check yourself and sometimes just get out of the line of craziness and go off to the side and just tread water for a moment. You're really not realizing that you're losing 15, 20, 30 seconds in the whole scheme of things. You could just tie your shoes quick. And that's what I tell a lot of people too. If you feel like you've lost time in the swim, just make your transitions quicker. Like you can make up 30 seconds in each transition, and that would be a minute. And and then because you were bummed about your swim being a minute slower, that's nothing in the whole scheme of things. And so
Yeah.
it's easier to make those things up in transition. Um, but yeah, that's the big one. Just kind of understanding that everyone's stressed. Get brightness to your eyes, breathe out as much as you possibly can. make that back into your stroke fast. Before you start, it's really sometimes thinking that there's no line at the bottom that you can really find. And so a lot of times it's looking for landmarks
Mhm.
before you even start to really kind of start to get yourself situated. And it's a great thing to practice when you start to kind of go to open water, is looking at the highest possible points on a horizon, whether it's a water tower or a bridge or a cell phone tower or just a really pointy, tall tree kind of on the horizon, and just really practicing on those things. Those are easier to spot than kind of low-lying fruit in terms of sights. Um, so, practicing that, and then it just kind of helps when you're out there and you kind of feel like you don't know where you are. You can kind of like, all right, I got to go to that pine tree and I'll be fine. So,
Yeah, I mean, spending some time pre-race, just like looking up and where you can look to, because yeah, sometimes those buoys, I mean, they're low, the sun's coming through, there's
yep.
people all over the place. It's hard to, to be able to get sight of them.
Yeah. And one
So,
thing it was a lesson I learned kind of late in life, and I never really had too many problems with foggy goggles, but that can really drive people nuts and make things more stressful. Um, and it's good to practice this before you actually do it. But if you take baby shampoo and you take the smallest possible amount of tearless baby shampoo and just kind of coat the inside of your goggle and just let it sit there for 15 seconds or so, and then just rinse it out, they're good to go. They won't fog up. A lot of people spit, or they use solutions, or they just buy new goggles with the hope that it's gonna to do. Any soap will work, but obviously you don't want to use something that you haven't used, kind of irritate your eyes. But sometimes I forget and I kind of just use the soap at the pool. But if you just put the smallest possible coat in, you're kind of good to go for the session. So
yeah, that's a good tip. So when you're, I mean, racing too, you talked about like if you panic to be able to go to the side and tread
yep,
water. I mean, it's okay to go lie on your back. It's also okay to grab a kayak or a canoe that's out on the course, just as long as you're not
yep,
moving with them. But
correct.
just take the time to take a few, deep breaths. And another thing that I'll tell my athletes is sometimes like they panic at the beginning is to count to 100 as they're
Yeah.
going, because that just focusing on the counting will tend to calm, I don't know, have a calming effect. But that's something good, like in practice, to be able to try, because you can't entirely simulate race conditions, but you can know, like developing a routine that you do before you get in to the start of a race can help settle the mind, I think, as well.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Um, I think one of the more stressful kind of swim workouts is when you breathe every 3 strokes, let's just say for 100, and then you do another 100, you breathe every 5 strokes, and every 7 strokes,
Mhm.
and every 9 strokes. That's a great way to kind of really bring out the stress of kind of survival
Yeah.
feelings of fight and flight, and how are you going to deal with it. Um, and so that's always kind of a good thing to do. Try every once in a while, because it really does. It focuses you on, when you're breathing every 7 strokes, breathing out as much as possible and really getting ready for like, all right, I'm going to get a breath because I'm going to have to swim, 7 more strokes after that. And so it really just focuses you on how do I get the best possible breath, becoming very, very kind of efficient and not just kind of thrashing. But
Mhm.
that's a good way to kind of mimic the stress.
So let's shift a little and talk about race starts. So there's a lot of different ways. Back in the day, the biggest race start was just mass start. Everyone gets in together. You don't see that very much anymore. I think for better, for worse. I think some people miss it, but it feels a little safer to start in smaller groups anyway. So, I mean, the
We
most
get
common,
away with that for so long. That's amazing. Like to come up with
yeah.
that concept nowadays would be like, you can't do that.
Oh, yeah. No,
Uh,
you can't. I mean, sometimes now that you'll still do group waves, like at a
right,
world championship, they want to make sure that everybody in the age group is
right.
starting at the same time, but you don't see 1,000 people starting at once anymore, 2,000 people. So, most common start now is the rolling
Yeah.
start. And for that, it's self-seated. So can you comment on that at all, on the importance of being realistic about your own times, but also knowing that the people around you are, people don't
Yeah.
do a great job self-seating.
Fast water moves fast. So I tend to bump people up 1 to 2 waves ahead of what our expectation is. Um, so if I have, excuse me, if I have like a 120 Ironman swimmer, I'll probably put him in the 115 group. Um, if I have a 115 Ironman swimmer, I'll put him in the 110. Just to, just take advantage of, again, just being around faster water. You're going to be drafting, you're going to be behind people. So it's, you know, sometimes you pick the right feet, sometimes you don't. It's just the way it goes. So,
So if you're not as comfortable in the water, like when they were group starts, I would tell my athletes who weren't as comfortable in the water to start sort of towards the back and the outside, just to be
yep.
away. But if you start too far back, then you're stuck, behind people who are really like too slow for you. I think some people start themselves too far back and then find themselves that they have to navigate through other swimmers. But
Yeah, I'd keep them wide. So I'd still keep them in a faster group, but I would just have them wider on the group to kind of just stay out of kind of the line of traffic. When
yeah,
you're
I mean,
wide too, you can basically see what's going on, and so all of a sudden you might cue in on some people that are kind of in around your area of
mhm.
effort and kind of latch onto them. But
Yeah, I mean, I think that the with the mass start swims, the first 200 was always like absolute chaos. But then I kind of felt like you could find your space or get in your groups. With the rolling start, I feel like you're never totally free, like you're always either paid because people don't self-assess very well. And so you either are passing or getting passed much more often. Like it never really clears up
no,
all the way. But
no. Oh, and then sometimes I would have enough of it, and I would just put the e-brake on and like just get narrow or wide depending on, because it would just sometimes you're just around people that just drive you nuts. It's almost like driving on the highway,
yeah.
and you're just kind of done with being around this group that's playing these games, or there's a certain kick. Like I remember sometimes people boom, 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 and it would just drive me nuts because of the bubbles. And I'm out of here. Like I'll just take a breather for 5 seconds and just let it
Just
go.
find if you feel like you need the space, there's usually a way to get to it. So
Yeah, because demeanor coming out of the water with some positive demeanor, no matter what happens in the swim, is probably the most important part of your swim segment. Is just how do you, because it's really hard sometimes just to nail the time, the goal time. Just there's too many moving pieces to get it perfect, and so it's really just making sure that you're coming out not frazzled
mhm.
and disappointed, as opposed to like, nope, it's a success. It's done. I didn't get stressed out with road rage, and I'm kind of ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality is like if you're out there for 10 hours or 12 hours or 14 hours or 16 hours, 3 minutes on the swim isn't going to make or
Yeah,
break your race, but if you can come out of the swim feeling like, okay, pretty relaxed, ready to take on the bike leg, you
yep,
know.
yep,
So what happens with all these people around you? Inevitably, you're going to get kicked in the face, kicked in the head,
yeah.
swam over. So do you have any tips for how to handle when something like that happens? Because I always say like swimming is a contact sport. You just have to accept that it is, but when it happens to you, it's still pretty unnerving, I think. So
Yeah, and it kind of gets to the realization that you might have to stop in terms of just getting out of whatever situation or group of people that you're around that's kind of becoming increasingly irritated and aggressive, and just kind of coming out of that, treading water and just gathering yourself. Because you run the risk of just losing your goggles popping off if you wear contacts. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, you lose a contact, or this or that. Um, so yeah, it's like you alluded to, like just taking a little breather in the whole scheme of things, really doesn't add up to much in the end. Um, because you can be around some abusive people, and it's just not worth it. And not them not knowing that they are, but it's just,
Mhm.
a certain technique, or, I would always have sometimes like somebody's arm was just as you take a stroke and their stroke is a little wider, and it would just start hitting you because it was just gets kind of annoying. So kind of hit the e-brake and go off to the wide portion of the swim, or narrow, and that. And
Yeah.
usually run into a lot of problems at the turns, where
Mhm.
everyone just dives for you know, um, the tightest portion of the turn. And I always tell people, like, especially for the first turn, just stay three, three shoulder lengths wider than you should. Because sometimes it comes to a complete bottleneck and stops, and you can actually go around people, as
Mhm.
opposed to kind of, come through that. So that can be a very tense time, because people sometimes stop and look around where they're going, and you're, full on going. Um, so it's important to know when those portions of the race are going to present themselves that might be a little more stressful than they should. And usually it's turn buoys.
Yeah, I always feel at the turn buoys that there's someone that gets up and is doing breaststroke or holding on, and it just, yeah, it can get so bottled up, and just to stay a little clear of it keeps you out of all that mess.
Yep.
So, from a strategy sample, let's kind of look at the swimmer who feels pretty good in the water. Things are going well. What's your recommendation in terms of how hard to go out, if there's a settle in phase, what to do, sort of like final 200? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's I always think of like two to 400, almost for an Ironman, 2 to 400 yards, 200 to 400 yards, kind of going out as hard as you possibly can, because it really does. It's jockeying for position, it's jockeying for drafting. Drafting just makes a huge difference. So if you get on some good feet, you can really kind of just have a magic carpet ride, and that can make a huge difference. So it's, yeah, 200 yards to 400, just really going out hard. That will dictate the grouping that you'll be in, and then it's just hanging on. Just keeping the effort relatively, stable at that point. It's really hard to kind of bridge gaps or anything along that line, and you're 45 minutes in to a 8 to 12 hour race. It just doesn't even matter. Um, Towards the end, it's just super important to realize that all your blood is pretty much in your upper body. And all of a sudden, you're going to go vertical. You're going to want to run, or you're going to have to run, and then you're going to have to get on a bike. And so it's kind of important to kind of kickstart your circulatory system to start to shuttle blood back to your legs. And I think anyone that's done a triathlon, it's just the weirdest sensation ever. Is like when you start riding your bike after a swim, it's just like everything just feels like horrible. Um, and there's just no blood there. So,
Mhm.
just start kicking, kind of as much as you possibly can, just to really start to kind of get that kickstart of blood moving towards your lower body. And then once you kind of go vertical, you'll definitely feel odd. I always hated the Ironman swims with the run break, kind of, if it was like 2 laps, you had to get out,
Wow.
run in between. Oh, it was the weirdest feeling ever. Um, And that's also something to think about when if your particular race asks you to do that, is to try that a couple times, because it's a weird sensation,
Mhm.
to go from swimming to running, very, very quickly. But no, go out hard. Just it is what it is at that point once you're done with that effort. And kick, that last 200 just to kind of get those legs going.
Yeah. Yeah, something good to practice. And also kind of along that lines is practicing getting into the water and getting out of the water when you're doing, because I think a lot of times people start swimming too soon, like they stop swimming prematurely, and then they're in waist deep in the water and they're trying to get to the exit, and that's a lot slower than continuing to swim as long as you possibly can
Yeah.
to the exit.
Yeah, it's dolphining. So it's a certain technique where, you run into the water and then you reach a point where, you can't really lift your knees much anymore. And that's when you start, kind of pushing with both legs and, dolphining through the water. You can watch some old Baywatch and you can kind of
Mhm.
see it's a, lifeguard technique too, where you're just in between that depth where you can't really run, you can't really swim yet. Um, and so it's kind of important to also, yeah, pay attention to the pitch of the start. But
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, like swim exits might be on ramps because it's not a natural exit, and you've got people grabbing you to go out and being comfortable with that too. I mean, there's so many like variations that can go into a swim. So the more you can know, I think, what to expect on race day and to be able to practice that in advance so that it's not a surprise is helpful.
yeah, definitely. Some races are great. They have people that will help you with your wetsuit. Most races, you got to figure out how to get out of a wetsuit yourself. Um, and again, that takes practice.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. You see people get caught up in their wetsuits, and the wetsuits are so tight that sometimes it's really hard. I had one
Really
even with the
hard,
wetsuit stripper, they're like yanking at my legs, and where you put the chip is also important. Like I like to actually put mine inside the wetsuit so that it doesn't get caught coming off of
right?
it, or someone doesn't kick it off. But if you're going to keep it outside, put a safety pin on too, I think, because the idea of losing the chip in the water, I mean, that happens too. So
Yeah, exactly.
someone
Um,
knocks it off.
yeah, definitely messing around with your wetsuit a little. Conditioner, hair conditioner, and around those points that are hard to kind of get off, or even on when you're putting your wetsuit on. Just a little hair conditioner. I used to have hair conditioner and like a like one part hair conditioner, three parts water, like spray bottle.
Mhm.
If you kind of just spray it on your legs and your arms, it will kind of slip right on. So
I have never heard that trick before. I love it. And I'm always like spraying my Body Glide. When I started racing, it was Pam. That's what people used to use before
yes,
the
yeah, I
glides came
remember
out.
that. And it
So
was like, didn't it do something to the neoprene or something? I
I
don't know.
think so. It wasn't very good for it.
No, it wasn't. But yeah, yeah, baby shampoo and conditioner that will kind
Yeah.
of get rid of your, foggy goggles, and then, just a little conditioner with water, spray bottle, and that, everything kind of slides right on. So
All right. I'm gonna have to try that the next time. I like that. So, um, yeah, so the coming out of the swim, one other, not totally related to the swim, but you were talking about the disorienting piece of it when you get out of the swim and running, is the importance of setting up a transition where you don't have to think
right.
because my brain doesn't ever work, so I'm like, okay, everything's got to be set up so logically so that I'm not, you know, worrying about whether
Anything.
I'm putting my left shoe on my
Sorry.
right foot,
Yeah. Completely disorientating. And people are yelling, screaming, tell you to go here or there, and um, it does take a little bit of prep. Most races are good, but it's also paying attention to, like, yeah, once you grab your bike, where are you going?
Yeah,
Um, how to get out of transition,
yeah.
how to get back into it. So those little things are important.
Yeah, I will say the key is just assume your brain is not gonna work when you get out of the swim. So, and then prepare for that. Know all this stuff before you hit the swim and how to get out. So, but
Exactly.
I mean, at the end of the day, for, other than maybe the sprint distance, the swim really is the shortest part
Yes.
of the day. And it's just making it through it. And some people will fly, people who come in from swim backgrounds will be super quick in the water, but that's not what most people are. And it's just get yourself to the next piece of the
Yeah.
race.
Yeah. And usually the great swimmers can't ride a bike. So,
Right.
so it's one of those things where everyone's going to have their strengths and their weaknesses. And it's really, just making sure that, I kind of touched on this earlier. It's just the demeanor, just having expectations and goal times. It's just so hard to kind of, again, get that perfect to give you the confidence for the rest of the day, as
Mm.
opposed to, just really being satisfied with the swim is over.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I need to get this swim done so I can get on the bike,
Right. Right.
So I gotta move it along because I want to get on the bike.
Yeah. And
So
then, we in QT2 we're just, halfway through the bike is that's when the race begins.
that's
And
right.
so, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that kind of feels good. And you have a
Yeah.
lot more time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. By the time you're done with the day, the swim seems like an eternity ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did have one race though, it was shorter course where I got out of the swim and it was nationals. I think the first year I did national championships and I thought I had a good swim, but I was swimming with people that were just better swim, it's like a different level. But it got me so, and I came out and I was like, all the bikes around me were gone. And that just made me mad
Oh
though.
yeah.
So I got out, I had the best bike and run. I'm like still to this day,
Yeah.
like a 10K PR on that race, like just so sometimes it can motivate you if you have a bad day, and then it can motivate you for the rest of the race. But whatever it is, you finish the swim is over, you move on,
Right,
can't
exactly.
change anything in the water that day. So just learn
Nope,
for the next time. And yeah.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Vinny. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you and hear all you bring to it. And I am the baby shampoo and conditioner now. I'm gonna start
Yeah,
putting those into my bag.
I know. I kind of learned all these things. I think when I started diving more in the water, ocean diving, um, that's when all these tricks came out, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I made it all this time without kind of doing that. So no, definitely,
All
always a
right.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.